Thanks for joining me on this journey, and welcome to the Journey with Jennie podcast on SM Enlightenment Radio or TV, where we hit all the topics that help and encourage you on this journey of life. Everything from health to mindset to business to finances. Anything that helps you and makes your life better, we cover it all. Welcome, everyone. So have I got a treat for you? You know that elusive fountain of youth that everyone talks about and dreams of finding? Well, if the fountain of youth actually existed, I think I might have found the person who found it. So we all know that the fountain of youth sadly does not exist, but new research in staying healthy longer does. I have a special guest today who is going to share cutting edge research in how to live a healthy life and actually extend your years. Do I have your attention? This is going to be a fascinating conversation. I'm so excited you are here. And it's not just going to be interesting to listen to, but you will actually have some action steps to take as well. So, my guest today is Dr. Joseph Antoun. Dr. Joseph Antoun always knew he wanted to help others through medicine, which is why he trained to be a physician. And let me tell you, his credentials are very impressive, including education at Harvard and Johns Hopkins and being a member of the Forbes Business Development Council. You can check out all of his credentials in our show notes. But in his journey, he figured out that medicine was actually sick care, treating patients after their health had already declined. Dr. Antoun wanted to be at the forefront of changing our current healthcare system of sick care to a more proactive approach, which meant taking care of our existing good health. So, after years of working at pharmaceutical companies and later focusing on public health policy, he found what he was searching for at L-Nutra Incorporated, a cutting edge Nutra technology company. So, as CEO of L-Nutra, Dr. Antoun works with one of the leading global researchers in the area of longevity, Professor Walter Longo, director of the Longevity Center at USC. So, together, they provide education and products to support a lifestyle that extends health span. So, we are going to get to chat with Dr. Antoun today. So, please help me welcome Dr. Joseph Antoun.
Thank you, Jenny, very much. I did find the fountain of youth. Look, I'm 74 with still black hair and look like in my 40s.
Yes, exactly. Amazing, right? Everyone is listening now.
And it works on the skin. I don't know if anyone is interested by keeping the skin, if we have any mid-age, great,
Yeah.
women watching us today.
So impressive list of credentials and the look as well. So I love it. So you have a fascinating and impressive list of roles and accomplishments, and you share that our healthcare was more like sick care. And so I'm curious, at what point in your career did you have this realization, and what impact did that have on your decisions as you went forward? Because I feel like most people, if not everyone that is in the healthy realm of life and looking at things, had this point of realization, right? That things were not as they thought they were. And so it's just interesting to me to hear others' journeys and where along their path that they had this realization. So I would love for you to share your journey with us.
Yeah, well, thank you. Growing up, I wanted to be a doctor because I wanted to help patients. For me, it was you become a doctor and you treat people, you help them, you save their life. But then when you get into it, you start feeling it's getting a little bit different because we're not dying of acute disease like before, where you have a pneumonia and then you take antibiotics and you cure a patient. Now we die of chronic diseases like diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease, and we have no cure for them. We basically subscribe patients for an everyday pill. I wanted to be a cardiologist, and doing my rotations at the hospital. I felt that I just was meeting people after they're sick. They come to us after they have hypertension or after their first heart attack, and then we put them on 5 pills at least. One for cholesterol, one for triglyceride, and one for blood pressure, and one for whatever blood thinner, etc.
Mhm.
And they have to take them every day of their life. And I was a little bit of a rebel, and my biggest question for my attendings was like, if the medicine works, why they have to refill it? That was my
Right?
biggest question, right? And I mean, even worse, they're gonna add. They don't know, but they're gonna add more, right? As
Mhm.
they age, and this is where I started thinking that I'm practicing actually sick care, seeing
Mhm.
people after they're sick, and I'm not curing them. I'm just subscribing them to a medicine, a pill per day. And I
Mhm.
thought we should do a better job. We should first be more preventive, and number two, be more curative. And this is what healthcare should be. And this is why I left and I went to health policy and public health. I stayed at Harvard and then did public health at Hopkins. And my goal is how can we reform the healthcare system into a
Mhm.
preventive one? And I did work with a lot of ministries of health around the world and supported a lot of policy change around the world. But prevention was a set of recommendation, and there's no product. Like if you say, "Hey, take this and you'll live healthy long," that doesn't exist even up until today. And this is what
Yeah.
actually inspired me to say, okay, how can I move and create a new technology, a new product that can help us stay healthy long? And this is how I met Professor Walter Longo. You mentioned his name. He's probably the
Mhm.
global leader in longevity. He's the head of the Longevity Institute at University of Southern California and has the famous book, The Longevity Diet, where he
Mhm.
talks about what we should eat to live healthy long. And I moved from medicine to health policy to nutrition because nutrition is the only product you put in your body since the day you're born, basically, to the day
Mhm.
you die. So it must carry the biggest signal of, healthy aging and or going towards chronic diseases. And this is where we made the biggest discoveries around the impact of food for longevity and the impact of food for medicine. Probably we're going to talk more about that
Yeah.
in the next few minutes.
Yeah, that's amazing. And it's so interesting to hear your journey through the medical realm and then public policy to come around to that. And it's interesting. And you're talking about back in the beginning of your journey about sharing exercising and eating well. And I remember reading in a book by a doctor that had this a similar journey. And just saying that they just had quick training on that in med school. And then one of the things is doctors will say, well, people aren't going to do that anyway. So let's move on to the next thing. Let's go to the pills.
Yeah. Unfortunately, and the nutrition industry didn't help, by the way, because the nutrition industry is not like it's putting ethical dollars and money behind true science to bring the right food to people to say, hey, we can help you without having you to go through the burden of pills. The
Mhm.
nutrition industry is just exploiting our palate. They're selling us something that tastes good, and they're trying to go around every policy. So whether they have to add preservative, whether they, oh wow, this is high protein, but then you have saturated or
Mhm.
unhealthy fats. So it's always a game of business that's either grabbing us from the
Mhm.
lifestyle and unhealthy lifestyle or from the pharmaceutical side. Obviously there's a lot of companies that are ethical and doing the right thing on both sides, but I'm saying the general trend hasn't been for us to stay healthy long. It's either to sell us more products, get us into disease, and everyone makes money when we're sick. It used to be before the last couple of rounds of reform. So yeah, our mission at L Nutra, L stands for longevity. So we study longevity through nutrition. And our mission is how can we put true science, uh, evidence-based, randomized clinical trials. This is why you see MD, PhD, and the founder is a PhD, I'm an MD, PhD, and chief medical officer. And we have the entire team that puts, evidence-based medicine behind food trials so that we uncover what is
Mm.
the best food you can eat to live a healthy, long life. This is if you're healthy, to stay healthy. And if you're
Mhm.
sick, we also do a lot of trials on if you have diabetes, what you should eat. If you have cancer, what you should eat. If you have Alzheimer's, what you should eat. And at the core of our discovery is actually we research a lot fasting and how can we give you the benefits of fasting while you're eating food. That has been our kind of biggest breakthrough in our research.
So that's fascinating. So I want to start with the fasting, and then I want to come back around later to all of that that you just said about I am curious what makes your company different, and you just said a few things, which I find that very fascinating. And I agree that the nutrition industry as a whole has not been very helpful. And it's like, okay, let's just do this, and here's a product. But hearing the research behind and the why behind what you have to offer. So let's start with the fasting, though, because like you said, your research zeroes in on fasting. I feel that is a very hot topic right now. And I would love for you to just clear up some of the chatter that is out there regarding fasting. And so what is that connection between fasting and longevity and nutrition?
Yeah. So and I get this question a lot. I'll clarify it by explaining the types of fasting
Okay.
and how each type of fasting gives you different benefits, and then it will build the bridge between longevity and therapeutic fasting, or how to help people with certain health conditions. So we divide fasting, if you want, into two big categories. Category number one is called intermittent fasting. And intermittent fasting is fasting between 0 hours to 2 days. So everything between that window is called intermittent. Beyond 2 days is called periodic or prolonged fasting. And why that 2 days period? Because and it's not like a timer. Each person is different. So it could be a day and a half for some, or 2 days, 2 days and a half for others. But on average, the first 2 days, if you don't eat, you have enough reserves in your body to kind of compensate for that. So the body goes to fat, the body goes to glycogen, and the body asks the liver to dump some calories. We call it a process of neoglucogenesis. So so you have, if you want, your savings accounts. Your savings accounts is the fat. Your checking account is the glycogen, where you can quickly take some calories from, and you have
Hmm.
a credit card called the liver, and all the three of them are enough to support you for the first 2 days. When you cross the second day, your body is telling the cells, hey, I'm not eating, I'm depleting fast my reserves. Now you got to look inside of the cell and try to eat the debris, the organelles, try to detox, try to optimize your performance. We are here to survive. It's getting difficult now. We cross second day of fasting, and you got to self eat and self optimize. And that process is called autophagy, or self-eat, auto for self, phages eat. So after the second day, the body is engaging the cells to rejuvenate. And that's the first time ever where we're seeing a biological age rejuvenation. We're seeing cells getting optimized as a positive response to a stress called fasting. This is why fasting is separate from any other diet. It works by stress, not just by calorie deficit. So, so
Interesting.
then you're engaging a cellular rejuvenation process, and this is how, if you're, say, you're, a 45-year-old woman, and you're starting feeling your aging process, and now you're pre-conditioned, you're pre-cancers or pre-diabetic or whatever is going to happen in your life afterwards. By doing that rejuvenation through fasting, crossing the second day, you're allowing your cells to repair, to rejuvenate, and to practice autophagy, which is a great for healthy aging and longevity. So that's to link the prolonged
Hmm.
fasting with aging. At the same time, if you have a health condition, your body says, wait a second, I'm in a very serious condition of fasting. Let me go and fix whatever is going wrong. And so when we studied fasting on diabetes, on cancer, on patients with Alzheimer's, first in mice, we see tremendous results, and then we go to humans, and we're finishing a lot of human trials now to show the impact potentially on fasting to support the body fighting health conditions. In
Wow.
to
That's fascinating. So just sorry to interrupt. So after fasting then with a condition, the body would then go to repairing that.
so the to simplify it, and I always use the analogy of, so imagine you're the CEO of a company. Say the company is like your body, and
Mhm.
say your body needs 1,600 calories per day. Say the company needs $1.6 million to operate per month. And so how every diet works, if I give you a low calorie diet, say, you go on whatever, on a low calorie Mediterranean diet or any of the brands, I don't want to name
Mhm.
brands,
Right.
but say instead of giving you 1.6 million, I give you 1.2 million or 1.4 million. So you have 200,000 deficit, you have a bank account, you lose a little bit, 200,000 of the bank account. This is how every diet works. You lose a little bit
Mhm.
of fat. Now, fasting is different. You need 1.6 million. I give you zero. Now you can imagine if you're the CEO, you're not going to just look at the bank account and see it drop by 1.6 million, which is good, which is good. You lose fat fast. So people
Yeah.
love fasting because they lose weight super fast.
Yeah.
But you understand it's a big crisis. So the
Mhm.
CEO is going to go and restructure the company, right? He's
Mm.
going to stop any ineffective expenditure. He's going to have to let some people go, and typically he will, let go people either costing him a lot of money or not working as
Right.
hard. He's
Mhm.
going to have to optimize the technology. He's going to have to fix and restructure the company to survive. And that's the stress that fasting brings to the body. It's a
Yeah.
positive stress. It's a fast stress of reparation. And then when you give that CEO back the money, now he has a very optimized company, and it can progress and grow in a better stage.
Interesting. That's a
So
great analogy.
this is the describe kind of how fasting helps with the longevity. Now, imagine that CEO knows that sales and marketing are not doing a good job. He's going to start fixing sales and marketing. And this is what the body does under fasting. He's like, wait a second, it looks like we have diabetes in here, right? I can fix it with losing weight, decreasing insulin resistance, and optimizing blood sugar. If you have cancer, cancer needs calories to grow very fast because it's a fast growing organ. So the body says, wait a second, we can starve cancer, we can rejuvenate white blood cells and do a better cancer attack. So in same with Alzheimer's, the brain is a fat organ. You fast the body, turns fat into ketone bodies. Ketone bodies are great food for the brain. The brain is a fat organ, loves the mid-chain fatty
Mhm.
acids. So if we, under fasting, we see the body trying to respond in a positive and tries to fight anything going wrong to survive. And that survival mode is what gives you that positive effect of longevity and or potential therapeutic fasting. Now, most people cannot fast. 2 days is where you start. So you need a
Mhm.
good 3, 4, 5 days of fast. So most people are not going to fast on water, and it's unhealthy also, not just difficult to comply with. And this
Mhm.
is why the National Institute of Health actually gave us millions of dollars to develop the fasting mimicking diet, meaning they told us, you're showing us amazing results in mice. Please show us the results again in humans. And this is what we've done in the last 12 years. But it was difficult to just do water fast. And they helped us, they funded us to develop a special program, a special nutrition program that now we deliver, anywhere in 14 countries. And it's called ProLon, fasting mimicking nutrition, PROLON, ProLon.
Hmm.
And it's 77 food ingredients, all plant-based, natural. There's no chemical, no artificials, no additive, artificial additives. So it's
Mhm.
a
I like
plant-based,
that.
healthy
Yep.
ingredients. And you eat the food for 5 days. You have your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner. It's like normal food. You eat it for 5 days, but your cells and your body would not recognize the food. And hence, it's a fasting mimicking nutrition. Gives you the benefits of fasting
Hmm.
while you're eating food. And so it's one of the biggest breakthrough in nutrition, actually. And we got over 300 patents filed on it. And your next
Wow.
your next question is how it works, and everyone's
Yes,
like, wait a
exactly. You read my mind. I'm like, how is it?
second.
So it's not food, but it's supposed to be food, or it acts like
It
food.
is
Like,
food.
yes. How does that work?
And this is what took us over $40 million in research and almost 23 years. Professor Walter Longo. And if you want
Wow.
the details, it's in the Longevity Diet book again, which was an Amazon bestseller.
Mhm.
But I'll explain it to you.
Thank
Um, the body recognizes food, if you want, with two mechanisms. When you eat at what we call an endocrine level, meaning at a systemic level, when you eat carbs, carb stimulates insulin secretion. Insulin is basically a hormone that tells the body, oh, we have carbs, take the carbs from the blood to the cells so that the cells get nourished. But
you.
it's a signal that there is carbs that you ate. When you eat, you have an insulin spike, which tells the body there's carbs. The same way, when you eat proteins, you spike something called IGF, insulin-like growth factor, another factor that tells the body you were eating protein. So the fasting mimicking diet, we study every kind of protein, and we develop complex carbs that actually, when you consume them, instead of having a spike of insulin, you just have a small bump and it goes very long but very thin. And instead of
Mhm.
spiking IGF, it just goes a little bit of a bump up and instead stays thin and for a long period, so that the body is not getting that spike of recognition. If you go back to the CEO example and you need $1.6 million, If you give him $600,000, for example, and you earmark it towards just paying HR and buying supply. So you're giving money to that CEO, but the stress is still on sales, on marketing, on operations,
Mhm.
on whatever is not getting the funds. And this is how the stress of reparation still is there, but actually you're giving some nourishment to the body. Now the other way it works as well is when you get to the cells have food radars. The three pathways they call the TOR pathway, the RAS pathway, and the PKA pathway. So these are three radars that tell the cell there's food, and the food is designed to go around them and or to minimally trigger them so that they're not satisfied enough and they still feel the pressure of fasting. So these are the two secrets of the fasting mimicking diet, and or again the brand name is called
Interesting.
ProLon.
So really the benefit is the actual fasting. So if you were able to actually fast for the 4 or 5 days or however long it needs to be, that would be ideal, but you're just letting your brain think that you are satisfied enough so that the body can actually carry through with the fasting, thinking that it's fasting,
Um,
correct?
Well, water fasting is actually not ideal because water fasting is a big stress that carries positive and negative. So if the CEO who needs $1.6 million, you give him zero, you can imagine also that yes, there's reparation, that yes, that CEO is going to restructure the company. At the same time, he or she are going to lose some of the best employees because if he cannot
Mhm,
afford paying them, they're going to go to a different company. That CEO cannot order supplies for next month to survive and to sell. So the fasting, depriving the body doesn't always have all the benefits. It has cost as well because
mhm,
the body needs calories. So the fasting mimicking diet in many aspects actually is better than water fast because at least you're giving something to the body to keep functioning. The body needs enzymes, proteins, minerals, vitamins, carbs, everything to operate. So what we like about the fasting mimicking diet is that you're making fasting safer because you're feeding the body. You're making
mhm.
it much more compliant and easy to do, less headache and the fatigue and all of that. But also you're funding the restructuring. You're giving enough calories and minerals and vitamins so the body safely transitions through what needs to do in fasting. So I wouldn't say water fast is better. Actually, we are against doing, and we were a water fasting company
Mhm.
because of the risk of going 5 days on fasting, or not always it's worth to deprive your body to zero for 5 days for certain benefits. When you do it with fasting mimicking diet, you're tipping the balance towards a lot more benefits than the sacrifice that your body would do.
Gotcha. So I have more questions about this, including how long the most typical fasting is and how you choose what the best one is if there's options. So I want to ask you those when we come back. But first, we have to take a quick break and we will come back and talk with Dr. Antoun more about these questions about fasting and get into more foods and more of the specific products that your company has and how to increase our health span. So you're listening to Journey with Jenny on SM Enlightenment Radio and TV. I'm Jenny, and we'll be right back. Welcome back to Journey with Jenny on SM Enlightenment Radio or TV or anywhere you listen to your podcasts. I'm Jenny, and we are talking with L Nutra CEO, Dr. Joseph Antoun, on how to increase our health span. And we have been specifically talking about fasting. So I want to pick up the conversation, talk a little bit more about fasting, and before we get into food and how all that works. Um, so, so tell this is just absolutely fascinating. So tell me about how long your the fasting mimicking diet or I guess I shouldn't use the word diet but lasts. Like, do you have different, you mentioned, fasting for 5 days, do you offer different days lengths and then make a decision on as to who should do different lengths, or how does that work?
Yeah. So, so just to clarify, we give you the benefits of fasting by you're eating food with us, and this is what we love the most is we make it safe, and you're being nourished. We do a nourished fast rather than a starvation fast. And again, it's all new technology, right? You're like, wait a second, what do you mean a nourished fast? And this is what we tried to explain. So we go back, if you remember, to the division of prolonged fasting more than 2 days and ideally 4 to 5 days so that at least you have 3 days of rejuvenation, cellular rejuvenation. And you have intermittent fasting, which is less than 2 days, and which is mostly works through weight loss, which helps the body deal with a lot of metabolic issues. So we have a product for prolonged fasting. It's called ProLon, and it's the 5-day fasting mimicking diet. That's our most consumed product, and people love ProLon because it's it's long enough to induce a full body rejuvenation. It's 5 days, but it's short enough for anyone to do it. It's, there's a day one and there's a day five versus any other diet in the market where you have to go, on days and days and days.
That's
And
true.
it leads to benefits right away. Fasting is such a transformational journey to the body that people in 5 days, change their relationship with food. Women lose around 5 to 6 pounds on average. Men lose around 8 to 9 pounds on average. It actually protects lean body mass. This is something very, very important.
Hmm.
When you go on a diet, typically the body goes in because there's a low calorie, so the body wants to, you know, is losing weight and it goes to muscle and to fat. It doesn't only goes to fat. So every time you do a diet, if you don't exercise or eat high protein, you're losing a little bit of muscle as well. Studies show that, for example, if you go on a Mediterranean diet for 4 months, you lose around 1.7 pounds of muscle. In fasting, actually, with ProLon, two of our clinical trials show that you don't lose relative lean body mass. And why is that so? We go to the concept of fasting working by stress as well, positive stress. So when you're fasting, there's a high, you know, uh, status of protectionist and positive stress in the body. So the growth hormone is high, and the growth hormone stimulates muscle. And because you're eating with Prolon, you're feeding that muscle, and this is what induces the rejuvenation and protecting muscle function. We actually have shown this twice already in our
Hmm.
trials, and I don't want to name names here, but there's NBA players that do the Prolon followed by protein diet. There's NFL, NHL players, big athletes that they do it for 5 days. They take it easy on exercising during the 5 days, and then they go back on a protein diet after and with exercise and to enhance their performance because they would lose only fat. They protect
Hmm.
their muscle, they rejuvenate their muscle, and then they refeed the muscle to actually enhance their performance. So that's very important because
Yeah.
all of us used to go on diets, and you go on a diet when you lose the muscle, you lose weight, you lose a little bit of muscle, you decrease your metabolic rate, and then you take back the weight super fast because you have a
Right.
lower metabolic rate.
Yep.
And then you take the fat back, you're not going to get the muscle back unless you exercise and all of that. So then you do another cycle of dieting, then you lose more muscle and
Hmm.
you swap it with fat. And this is what the cycle that nobody talks about in
Right.
dieting because they don't want to unveil what their products are doing. With Prolon, you're protecting lean body mass, you cut fat, then you go off, and it's only 5 days. Then you go eat whatever you want. You're going to start gaining a little bit if you eat unhealthy, and then you do another cycle. And typically, most people do it 3 to 4 times only per year.
Okay.
And you're rarely going to find a CEO telling you do my product just 3 or 4 times a year
Right.
rather than do it every day. So this is to get this healthy aging plus weight loss and rejuvenation by doing the 5 days and inducing autophagy. By the way, we didn't say the cellular rejuvenation process through fasting, it won the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2016. So
Wow.
it's a big proven thing now. A lot. Go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna ask, so one of my questions that you answered was how many times typically? So you mentioned athletes and the kind of athletes and regular people or so, if athletes aren't regular people. But what about, so you mentioned using it for illnesses like diabetes or cancer because it promotes the cell rejuvenation. Would someone with those issues or various issues potentially be doing it more than 3 to 4 times a year?
So because I mentioned the brand name, I cannot connect the nutrition
Oh,
to
okay.
treating a disease. But what I will tell you is that we're launching a program around the fasting mimicking diet, which will have a dietitian, the fasting mimicking diet, and an app, we're launching a program next year for diabetes. We call it diabetes remission and regression. In that program, we advise that you do the fasting mimicking nutrition 6 times a year in
Right.
order to induce what we call a remission, meaning you're off medication from diabetes, or
Mhm.
regression, meaning you need less medication
Mhm.
from it. When we studied the fasting mimicking nutrition on cancer, and we studied a lot breast cancer, we have 3 or 4 studies on it. We do it right before the chemotherapy or right before the hormone therapy. And the concept is, cancer is a fast growing organ. It's a cell that loses inhibition, keeps growing. It grows as a mass and then goes everywhere as a
Mhm.
metastatic cancer. And so, because it grows fast, it needs nutrition. And if you deprive it, if you fast cancer with the fasting mimicking nutrition, then on day 4 or day 5, you hit it with the chemo or with the hormone therapy, you're hitting a very much weakened cancer.
Yeah.
And this is how we hope that we create a nutrition environment to optimize or to support the current standard of care being chemo or being hormone therapy.
Interesting. Okay, that's amazing. Really amazing. Um, you mentioned nutrition then. So then going off the prolong and then going into good nutrition. So, what kind of nutrition do you recommend that can potentially prevent age-related diseases?
So the philosophy and our founder, Professor Longo, follows a lot of centenaries around the world, people living 100 and beyond, we call them the centenaries, and the blue
Mm-hmm.
zones that you've heard about,
Hmm.
and or the longevity zones.
Yeah.
And we literally track that. We track what they eat, we track how they live, and we try to understand what is that common nutrition pattern that they have, so that we bring it and we test it in mice, and then we go and help people follow that nutritional pattern so that we stay healthier longer. And what we discovered is that it seems it's a pescatarian slash flexitarian diet. So it's a plant-based diet, and you add to it the main source of protein coming from fish.
Hmm.
And then from time to time, you can add meat or not. And again, pescatarian would be no meat. Flexitarian is some meat, but less than Mediterranean. So just rarely some meat. And,
Mhm.
and this follows, if you want, the human evolution on the planet, right? We're tailored by nature. We lived for hundreds of thousands of years in nature, and despite all these crazy theories that you hear about, we lived in caves and we slept in caves to protect ourselves, but there's no water in cave, there's no food in caves, or we ate animal food all the time. We couldn't even hunt for most of our existence on the planet. We actually lived around rivers. Humanity couldn't live around oceans because it's not drinkable and there's no trees or plants to eat from. We
Mhm.
lived on rivers where the water was drinkable and where there was a lot of grass and trees and fruits and vegetables to consume from. And then fish was the only animal that couldn't run or couldn't fly, and it was easy to hunt. And
Easy
then
catch.
yeah, easy to catch. And this is how we became pescatarian. And then with evolution, we learned how to hunt few animals, and we added some meat to our diet. So our body, we believe longevity is when you rematch your body with what the body is has been tailored to respond
Hmm.
mostly to. And anytime you deviate from it, if you eat ketogenic every day, if you eat meat every day, if you all these theories that might help you on the short term if you have an objective. So if you want to build muscle, yeah, maybe some meat on the short term will help you. If you have a health condition or you want to drop your blood sugar, you have diabetes, ketogenic might help you on the short term. But if you want to conduct a healthy aging lifestyle and try to give yourself a better chance to live a healthy long life or a pro longevity diet, we think it's a pescatarian diet slash flexitarian
Mm.
diet that is the best match.
Interesting. So then would you say that there needs to be any type of balance between carbs, proteins, fats inside that diet, or it's just kind of as long as you're having lots
Yeah,
of all of that, you're fine?
yeah. So the word today that we live in, we had so much carb that everyone is reacting to carb. It has to be low
Right.
carb and high protein, right? This is every theory, but
Yes.
we haven't seen diabetes decreasing and we haven't seen cancer
Mhm.
decreasing, right?
Hmm.
So it goes back to, are we leading an artificial, I strongly believe we live currently in a fad. That people ask me, is fasting a fad? Is pesca? Where we
Mhm.
live now, eating all the time and carbs and high protein, this is a fad.
Mhm.
And what we have discovered is that if you want a balanced diet, it has to have carbs, but not
Mhm.
sugar, not refined. It is complex carb. It's carbs that you find in legumes. It's carbs that you find also in nuts. It's carbs that you find in vegetables, and not so much the fruit because you get closer to the sugar, to the smaller
Right.
chain of carbs. So complex carbs are good. And by the way, every cell in the body lives on carb. Every cell. So
We
so
need carbs.
we need carbs. And then proteins, of course, we all, are living this era of you should eat high protein and you should supplement with protein,
Mhm.
which there's a lot of theories that that's connected to the risk of cancer because you keep pushing your body to grow, right? If you want to grow
Mhm.
muscle, you eat protein, but why just the muscle grows? Because you practiced, you get more blood flow, the muscle reacts to it. But every organ is getting high protein as well and is getting a little bit pushed towards aging. So a balanced carb and protein. And actually, we're a good source of fat, especially coming from nuts. So the healthy fat. We don't want the
Mhm.
fried fat. We want the healthy fats that
Oh,
actually people don't realize it but the brain is a full fat organ and there's healthy fats, which is ketone likes and could be great nourishment for the body. Every cell has a lot of fat in its membrane, etc. So a diet that's balanced between carbs and protein and also contains healthy fats. And if you want to think about it, means legumes, vegetables, nuts, and then you add fish and seafood to it, to pescatarian, and rarely lean meat.
yeah.
That's for us the longevity diet.
I love that. So, what is your answer to, because I agree with that. I think that is where we ought to be, and where we're best eating. But then there's also the issue of our naturally grown food is depleted, it has fewer vitamins and minerals and nutrients compared to even 30 years ago. So what do you have to say to that? How do you address that?
I mean, it's literally going back to regenerative medicine, back to organic, sources rather
Mhm.
than genetically modified. And then again, the unconspired conspiracy theory, which is the supplement companies. Oh, you're deprived, get my supplement, right? So, so how can we go back to business wanted us to genetically modify thing and get a higher yield and higher crop,
Mhm.
and gluten is one of the biggest stories because we now all are going for no gluten or low gluten. Why? Because not because all of us have celiac disease. A low percentage of us have the true celiac disease. A lot of us are hypersensitized to gluten because gluten is very high in our food. Because years and years ago, we genetically modified
Mhm.
wheat to contain more gluten because you have more yield per square footage, right? So
Mhm.
so business played with how wheat is being produced, has high gluten. We eat bread. We are exposed to more gluten than necessary. We get
Mhm.
hypersensitized at the mass level to gluten, and now we're looking to eat less gluten. And this is all wrong. You should just go
Yeah.
back and have naturally, old wheat that we can eat that doesn't have high gluten, and therefore most of us will be okay eating that low gluten content bread and don't have to go on zero gluten artificially done food for us and then
Right.
supplement with pills and other stuff. So
Exactly.
going back to true honest, agriculture is the way to solve that. And hey, some supplementation is not wrong. We're not against supplementation, but it's everything should be balanced is what we believe in, and you supplement when you lack rather than you build a system where you always lack and you always have to supplement.
No, I agree. I think that's great. And it also shows that there are other countries that don't have as many issues with those kinds of things when you don't have the, GMOs and the modified wheat. It makes a difference. It definitely affects your health.
Yeah, for sure. And we keep doing the same thing and we expect different results. And just
Mhm.
just for our listeners today, I mean, not only we're living sicker longer, but we're losing lifespan. The United States lost zero point 0.4
Mm.
years on lifespan in the last few years. So we're spending now $4 trillion on healthcare. We're getting sicker younger,
Yep.
and we're losing lifespan. And the solution is really in front of us, is having a better lifestyle. Again, we just talked about the longevity,
Mhm.
nutrition, what we should eat. There's also the intermittent fasting is very important. We believe in the 12 hours, what we call circadian fasting.
Mhm.
So I mentioned we studied a lot of centenarians, and I'll
Mhm.
give you a couple of secrets. Not many of them or not all of them do a pescatarian or flexitarian diet. Some of them, they fry bacon, they eat, fat, they smoke. They're actually doing the interview with us while smoking. But there are two things that we see very, very common in them. Is the 12 hours fasting. So they sleep early, right? They eat. There used to
Um,
be in their village or in their, the sun is down. That's it. We go
they
back
go to bed.
home. We
Mhm.
go back home. We have an early dinner, a little bit of walking, a little bit of family time, and then they sleep. And then they wake up the next day and then they have a light breakfast after that. But they have that 12 hours. There's no snacking at 11. There's no Netflix. There's no
No ice
late
cream, yeah,
night and
while
no ice
watching
cream, no
Netflix.
late night. So no Uber Eats. So it's literally that 12 hours seems to be, and it makes sense, right? You eat during the
Mhm.
day. You're 12 hours you're eating, you got to spend it, right?
Yep.
And you got to allow your body to rejuvenate. So the Nobel Prize in Medicine 2017 was on the biological clock of the body. It's basically saying
Hmm.
every organ needs to rest. It's not resting the brain when you sleep only or just resting your muscle. Every organ has a cycle of anabolism, transform the calories we ate into, whatever growth or fat or energy. And then you have to rejuvenate. You have to go back and you have to spend it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you're always eating, you're always stacking fat, and this is what's happening to us becoming obese and diabetic today.
Mhm.
And so that balance of what we call circadian fasting of 12 hours seems to be very important. The
Hmm.
second secret they have is that they're happy.
Mm.
And they have their families around them, and they have love that they receive and they give. So
Yeah.
that social capital seems
Mhm.
to be critical. They live in their villages or with their family. They're happy. They're laughing. They're smiling, and we feel that that serenity, that purposefulness, that happiness, that social capital is so important. It competes with nutrition probably as the top two pillars for longevity. I mean, we
Hmm.
know stress impacts longevity. We know exercise, nutrition, and this social capital and giving and receiving love. But in our studies, it seems nutrition and being happy compete at the biggest impact at longevity. So that's very important because,
Yeah.
every day now we live a very stressful life. And it's very important to remind ourselves that, yeah, have a spikes of stress, but have a happiness to be your bottom line every day. This will help you live a longer, healthier life.
I think that's such a good message, especially for Americans, because I feel like our culture is so much just work, 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 and pile on this stress, and I don't have time to have fun or
Yeah.
to, take a break, and I'll rest when I'm dead. It's like the common
Yeah.
phrase, and I think that's such an important message, and for you to say equal to, in these parts with nutrition, that just shows how important that is.
Yeah, and I think it's the trigger of everything. So when you're happy, you don't feel the binge eat that you do, and
Mm,
therefore,
true.
you don't become and if you're happy, you're sleeping with a high
Mhm.
quality. And if you're happy, you have the energy to get out of the couch and exercise.
Yeah.
If you're happy, your stress level are lower. So that seems to be the source of all the four other pillars of longevity.
Yeah.
And it is very, very, really a very important metric or pillar for a healthy long life.
Wow, that's amazing. You just gave us several key takeaways. Do you have any other? We have just a few more minutes left. I can't believe that time has completely flown. What else? Wise words of wisdom for us? Any other tips and tricks? Any other things that you want to share about you and your company?
Yeah, I just want to give you the like my secrets for healthy longevity, if you
Hmm.
want, is
Yeah.
definitely a pescatarian diet, is eat early and the night, don't snack late, and then allow that 12 to 14 hours of fasting. 2 to 3 times a year or max 4 times if you want to do the fasting mimicking diet, ProLon. It's like it's like when you're driving a Formula One car and the wheel are or a race car, the wheels are being torn and then the engine is heat. You take a pit stop and then the mechanics come rejuvenate. It's the same thing. ProLon takes you to that cellular rejuvenation. It's like when you reset your computer. If you're on your laptop for days and becomes slow, you just turn it off and then turn it on again. That reset done 2 to 3 times a year I think is going to be important. And then happiness and social capital. Make sure you have time to think about self-love and be close to your surrounding, to your friends, to your family. It seems that time of serenity and happiness is also very important for a healthy long life.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Antoun, for being my guest today, for sharing us all of your amazing tips and tricks for us to live a healthy, long, happy life. This has definitely been a fascinating and enlightening conversation, and I'm just so grateful you were here. Thank you.
Thanks for hosting me, Jenny.
That's a wrap. Thanks so much for joining me on SM Enlightenment Radio or TV, or joining us on the Journey with Jennie podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please download my podcast and leave a 5-star rating and review. It really does help, and I would be so grateful. I'm Jennie. Have a good one.